Hi, my name's Jamie Johnson. I'm a DUI attorney with offices in Woodbridge and Gainesville, Virginia. What about jail time? What am I facing? What are the possibilities? There are lots of factors that go into your possible jail time. Anything from have you had prior DUIs? What was your BAC? What was your driving behavior? Was there an accident involved with other vehicles? Who's your attorney? Who's your CA or your commonwealth attorney? And who's your judge? All these things factor into what are your possible jail time outcomes. There are a couple mandatory jail times, however, that are laid out by statute, which takes some of that out of the control of the judge or the commonwealth attorney or your attorney. If you've been charged for DUI first and your blood alcohol content was a 0.15 to a 0.20, if it's in that range, then you're facing 5 mandatory days in jail. That's day for day. It's not the typical Virginia half days where if you're convicted of a misdemeanor, you only serve half your time. So if the judge sentences you to 10 days, you only do 5 days. When it's mandatory time, you have to do day for day. So when the judge says 5 days, you're doing 5 days. If your BAC for DUI first is a 0.21 or above, you're looking at a mandatory 10 days. And usually if you're above that, above the 0.21, then you're going to get more than just the 10 mandatory days. The judge is going to possibly give you a couple additional days. But you do the 10 mandatory days first, day for day, and then that would switch over to the typical half-day credit for misdemeanor offenses. So if the judge sentences you to 20 days, so you have a DUI first with a 0.22 BAC, judge says, I hereby sentence you to 20 days, 10 are mandatory. So you would do the first 10 mandatory days, 10 for 10, and then the second 10, you would do half because it's a misdemeanor, so you only have to do 5 for that. So you do a total of 15 days in jail for that. And that, I've seen that happen a lot, especially in Prince William, if you have a really high BAC, and an officer comes in and talk about how you're swerving all over the place and you're a danger to other people on the road. Usually you're going to get more than just the mandatory days, unless your attorney is able to really fight that case and put some chinks in the officer's testimony. If you're charged with a second DUI within 5 to 10 years since your previous DUI, you're facing 10 mandatory days in jail just for the fact that you had a prior DUI. So if you're charged with second of 5 and 10, your BAC is a 0.08, you're still looking at 10 mandatory days in jail. If your BAC is elevated, or a 0.15 to a 0.20, then you're looking at 20 mandatory days in jail. So you get that big jump because it's a second DUI. If you have a second DUI in that 5-10 range, you have a 0.21 or above, you're looking at 30 days mandatory in jail. A full month, you're sitting for the full 30 days. It gets even worse if you have a second DUI within the last 5 years. So if you had a prior DUI 3 years before and then you're charged again, you're looking at 20 mandatory days just for the fact that you're charged with a DUI again. And if you have the elevated one, or BAC from a 0.15 to a 0.20, you're looking at 30 days. And if you have the elevated BAC of a 0.21 and above, you're looking at 40 days mandatory. So they keep adding on the additional 10 days if it's within 1 to 5 years as opposed to being between 5 to 10. If you are charged with a third DUI within 10 years, then you're looking at 3 months mandatory. That's 3 months you're going to go and sit. If it's a third DUI within 5 years, you got problems. You really need an attorney because you're looking at 6 months mandatory. I mean, this is mandatory time. And of course, if you have a charge with a fourth DUI, it's a felony. You're looking at 1 year mandatory in jail. A full year mandatory, you're sitting. That can really wreck your professional and personal life. So make sure you're speaking with an attorney if you're facing these elevated BACs. Usually the attorney can poke holes in either the administration of the breath test or some other defenses that they have, which they can use with the commonwealth attorney to try to reach a plea agreement to knock the BAC down or reduce the charge from a second of 5 to a second of 10 to help reduce the amount of mandatory jail time you're facing. If you're facing a DUI that's more than just a first, you really, really need to speak to an attorney. If you're facing a DUI first, you should still really think about hiring an attorney instead of going your own route, because just because you're charged with it doesn't mean that they're going to find you guilty of it. They still have to prove their case. So make sure that you hire an attorney that can, put pressure on them to make sure they're being able to prove their case and meeting their requirements set out by statute.